What happened inside Iron Gate Correctional Facility still haunts the officers who were there. If you enjoy intense true crime stories like this, hit subscribe, drop a like, and stay with the story. Because what started as a normal lunch hour turned into something investigators still struggle to explain. The cafeteria at Iron Gate was usually the loudest place in the prison. Metal trays slammed against tables. Hundreds of inmates talked, laughed, argued. Guards shouted instructions while kitchen carts rolled across the concrete floor. Every day sounded the same, chaotic, loud, alive. Until the moment everything stopped. Officer Daniel Hayes noticed it first. He was standing near the entrance of the cafeteria, watching over nearly 400 inmates during the midday meal. The room had been filled with noise only seconds earlier. Then, without warning, every sound disappeared. No voices. No trays. No movement. 400 inmates sat completely silent. The silence was so sudden that Hayes felt a chill crawl up his spine. It wasn't normal prison quiet. It was the kind of silence that felt planned. Every inmate stared down at their food trays. No one spoke. No one looked around. It was as if someone had given an order only they could hear. Hayes stepped forward slowly. "All right, what's going on here?" he called out. No response. Across the room, another guard tried to joke. What? Did someone finally run out of things to complain about? Still nothing. The kitchen staff stood frozen behind the serving line. One of them, a civilian cook named Laura Bennett, looked pale and shaken. Warden Michael Carter arrived minutes later after hearing the strange radio call from the cafeteria. "Explain," he demanded. Hayes shook his head. "They just stopped." The warden scanned the room. Hundreds of inmates sat quietly, eating slowly, never speaking. Some didn't even touch their meals. It didn't look like fear. It looked like obedience. Then one inmate stood up. His name was Marcus Hale, a quiet prisoner serving time for financial fraud. He calmly walked toward a trash bin, dropped his untouched tray inside, and returned to his seat without saying a word. A few seconds later, another inmate did the same. Then another. Within minutes, dozens of trays filled the garbage containers, meals completely untouched. Something was very wrong. The warden ordered a full search of the kitchen and food storage areas. And when officers opened the large walk-in freezer behind the cafeteria, they discovered something that made the entire prison go silent for a very different reason. The freezer door creaked open slowly, and a wave of icy air rolled across the kitchen floor. Officer Daniel Hayes stepped inside first, his flashlight cutting through the dim white fog drifting from the cooling vents. Rows of metal shelves filled the room, stacked with boxes of frozen vegetables, packaged meat, and sealed food trays meant for the next day's meals. Everything looked normal at first glance. Too normal. "Start checking everything," Warden Michael Carter ordered. Two officers moved deeper into the freezer while Hayes examined a large plastic container sitting alone on the bottom shelf. It wasn't labeled like the others. He pulled the lid open. Inside were dozens of sealed food packages, but they didn't look like the standard prison supplies. The packaging was different. Plain, unmarked plastic without the usual supplier labels. "What is this?" Hayes asked. No one answered. The civilian kitchen supervisor, Laura Bennett, stood at the doorway, visibly nervous. Her hands trembled as she watched the officers inspect the container. One officer sliced open a package with his pocket knife. Inside was ground meat. But something about it looked wrong. The color was slightly darker than usual, and the smell carried a strange chemical scent. "Bag it," Carter said immediately. Within minutes, the entire kitchen became an investigation scene. Officers sealed the suspicious packages while radio calls spread through the facility. The prison doctor was called to test the food. Meanwhile, back in the cafeteria, the inmates still hadn't spoken a word. Detectives later described the scene as one of the most disturbing displays of silent coordination they had ever seen inside a correctional facility. Hundreds of men, sitting quietly, refusing to touch their meals. Like they already knew something was wrong. Detective Sarah Collins from the State Investigation Unit arrived an hour later. She had handled corruption cases in prisons before, but nothing like this. "Why didn't they eat?" she asked Warden Carter. "We don't know," he replied. Collins studied the garbage bins filled with untouched trays. This wasn't random, she said. Someone warned them. The question was how. Phones were restricted. Conversations were monitored. Messages inside prison usually spread through whispers, coded notes, or gang signals. But this silence, this level of coordination, meant something bigger. Collins began interviewing inmates one by one. Most refused to speak. Some only shook their heads. Finally, after hours of questioning, one inmate quietly slid a folded piece of paper across the table. Collins opened it slowly. Inside were only 4 handwritten words. "Check the kitchen, supervisor." Collins looked up immediately. Laura Bennett was gone. And when officers searched her office behind the kitchen, they found a locked desk drawer. Inside it was a stack of documents and a list of inmate numbers. Next to each number was a single word. Silent. By the time detectives realized Laura Bennett was missing, Iron Gate Correctional Facility was already in full lockdown. Every gate sealed. Every corridor monitored. Guards moved through the prison in pairs, searching offices, storage rooms, and staff areas. But Laura Bennett, the quiet kitchen supervisor who had looked so nervous in the doorway, had disappeared without a trace. Detective Sarah Collins stood inside Bennett's small office behind the kitchen, studying the papers found in the locked desk drawer. The list of inmate numbers stretched across several pages. Next to each number was the same word written again and again. Silent. Officer Daniel Hayes leaned against the wall. "You think she organized it?" Collins shook her head slowly. "No. Someone else did. She was just part of it." The documents revealed something disturbing. Over the past 6 months, Bennett had been secretly logging food deliveries that never appeared in the official prison inventory. Meat shipments. Canned goods. Boxes of frozen supplies. Thousands of pounds of food. Missing. Where did it go? Hayes asked. Collins pointed toward the cafeteria. The inmates knew. That's why they stopped eating. As investigators dug deeper, the truth began to surface. The prison kitchen had been running a hidden operation. Certain shipments were quietly removed before they ever reached the serving line. Those supplies were sold illegally through outside contacts, making thousands of dollars every month. To hide the shortages, cheaper replacement products were brought in, low-quality, unmarked food packages that barely met safety standards. Sometimes, they didn't meet them at all. But someone inside the prison had discovered the scheme. And instead of starting a riot, they did something far more dangerous. They organized silence. Hundreds of inmates refusing food at the same moment would force the prison administration to investigate the kitchen. It would expose everything. Collins flipped through the documents again. At the bottom of one page was a name circled in red ink. Marcus Hale. The same inmate who had been the first to throw his tray away. Collins immediately ordered officers to bring Hale in for questioning. But when guards opened his cell in cell block C, they froze. The bunk was empty. Marcus Hale had vanished. No forced doors. No alarms. No camera footage showing him leaving the block. Just an empty cell and a folded note sitting on the metal mattress frame. Hayes handed the note to Collins. She unfolded it carefully. 3 words were written in black ink. "He knows now." Collins looked up slowly. "Who knows?" Hayes asked. Before she could answer, the prison's emergency alarm suddenly screamed through the building. Because someone had just found Laura Bennett. And she wasn't alive. The alarm echoed through Iron Gate Correctional Facility as officers rushed toward the kitchen corridor. Detective Sarah Collins pushed through the crowd of guards until she reached the storage hallway behind the cafeteria. Laura Bennett lay on the cold concrete floor near the walk-in freezer door. A medical team was already kneeling beside her. After a few tense moments, one of them stood and shook his head. The room fell into a heavy silence. Officer Daniel Hayes ran a hand over his face. So whoever was behind this silenced her. Collins crouched near Bennett's desk clipboard, which had fallen beside her. Papers were scattered across the floor. One page had a simple diagram of the kitchen storage area and delivery routes. At the top of the page were 2 words. "Stop shipments." Collins understood immediately. Laura Bennett hadn't been running the food scheme alone. She had been trying to expose it. The prison's food supplier contracts were worth millions of dollars. Someone outside the prison, and someone inside it, had been replacing legitimate food deliveries with cheaper, unregulated products. The difference in cost was being stolen. When Marcus Hale discovered it, Bennett secretly helped him collect records. The plan had been simple. Marcus would organize the silence. Hundreds of inmates refusing food at the same moment would force an investigation into the kitchen supplies. And it worked. But the people behind the operation realized the truth too late. Collins turned to Hayes. Marcus didn't disappear. Someone took him. The investigation widened overnight. Financial records, supplier contracts, and shipping logs revealed a shocking connection. The prison's main food supplier was owned by a private logistics company, and one of its board members was Warden Michael Carter's brother. When investigators confronted the warden, he denied everything. But bank transfers told a different story. Money had been moving through shell accounts for years. Millions of dollars. The silence in the cafeteria had triggered the one thing the scheme couldn't survive, an outside investigation. Within weeks, arrests followed. Several contractors were charged with fraud and corruption. Warden Carter resigned during the investigation. But one mystery was never solved. Marcus Hale was never found. Some believe he escaped during the chaos. Others believe someone made sure the man who exposed everything would never speak again. Yet inside Iron Gate, the story still spreads quietly among inmates and guards. About the day hundreds of prisoners stopped talking at the exact same moment. And how their silence exposed a crime no one was supposed to notice. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it.